Emily Carter stood outside the small lakeside cafe for a moment before going in. The evening air was cool, and orange leaves moved across the quiet street of the Vermont town. Normally, she loved this peaceful place. But tonight her heart felt heavy. Inside the cafe, two men were waiting for her. Both mattered to her more than she ever expected. And tonight she believed she would walk out having lost one of them. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Warm light filled the cafe. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread hung in the air. A few people talked quietly at nearby tables, but Emily barely noticed them. Her eyes went straight to the corner table by the window. Daniel Brooks sat there, calm and steady as always. Across from him sat Ryan Walker. Leaning back in his chair with his usual relaxed confidence, the moment Emily saw them together, her stomach tightened. They looked so different from each other that sometimes it still surprised her how both of them had become important in her life. Daniel was the quiet type. He had thoughtful eyes and a calm way of speaking that made people feel comfortable around him. As a high school history teacher, he had spent years explaining the past to teenagers who rarely cared about it. Yet somehow he always stayed patient. Ryan was nothing like that. Ryan lived fast. He was a travel photographer who spent half his time chasing storms, mountains, and sunsets across the country. His stories always sounded like something from a movie. Emily had never planned to fall for either of them, and she definitely had never planned to fall for both. Daniel noticed her first. He stood up from the table with a gentle smile. "Hey, Em," he said softly. Ryan turned and grinned when he saw her. "Well," he said, "you look like someone about to change 3 lives." Tonight, Emily forced a small smile and walked over to the table. Her legs felt strangely weak, like she was walking into a moment she could not escape. She sat down across from them. A waitress came over. But Emily only asked for water. Her throat felt too tight for coffee for a few seconds. No one spoke. All 3 of them knew why they were here. The situation had been growing more complicated for weeks. Small things had started it. Long talks. Late evenings together, the quiet understanding that Emily's feelings for both men were becoming impossible to ignore at first. Everyone tried to pretend things were simple, but feelings rarely stay quiet. Forever. Daniel folded his hands on the table. "You said you needed to talk tonight," he said gently. Ryan watched her carefully. His expression was relaxed, but his eyes were serious. Emily took a slow breath. "I did." Words felt heavy. She had spent nights thinking about this conversation, imagining it, practicing what she might say. But now that the moment had arrived, nothing felt easy. "I thought tonight would be the night I finally decided," she said. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Decided what?" Emily looked from one man to the other. "You both know." Ryan leaned back slightly, understanding appearing in his eyes. "Oh." Daniel's gaze dropped to the table. A quiet tension settled over the small space between them. Emily continued. "Slowly, I never meant for this to happen. When I met Daniel, everything felt simple, calm/safe. Daniel looked up briefly but didn't interrupt. Then Ryan came into my life," she said. Ryan gave a small, almost guilty smile. "That tends to happen." Emily sighed softly. "You brought excitement into my world. It's adventure. You made me see things differently." Ryan didn't look proud of that. Instead, he looked thoughtful. "I never meant to complicate your life." Emily shook her head. "You didn't? My feelings did?" The waitress placed her water on the table and left again. Emily took a sip, hoping it would calm her nerves. "I care about both of you," she said honestly. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. Daniel stayed quiet. Emily's voice became softer. "That's why this is so hard." Ryan looked across at Daniel. For a moment, then back at Emily. "Usually stories like this end one way," he said. Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, I know." Daniel finally spoke again. "It's okay if you choose him," he said calmly. Ryan looked surprised. Daniel continued, quietly, I just want you to be happy. Emily's chest tightened when she heard that this was exactly why the decision hurt so much. Daniel's kindness made her feel safe in ways she had never experienced before. Ryan leaned forward slightly. Hey, hold on, he said to Daniel. You're not giving up already, are you? Daniel gave a faint smile. I'm not giving up. I'm just being honest. Ryan looked back at Emily. So, what's the decision? Emily stared at the table. She had believed she would come here tonight and choose one man. That was the logical solution. It's the simple ending. But every time she imagined saying goodbye to one of them, something inside her resisted. She looked up slowly. I thought I'd have to lose one of you tonight, she admitted. Ryan nodded, double quotes. Yeah, that's what we expected. Emily took a deep breath. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. Daniel watched her carefully. What? He asked. Emily hesitated. Then she said the words she had been afraid to speak. I don't want to lose either of you. Ryan blinked. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. Confusion mixing with curiosity. Ryan tilted his head. I'm not sure that's an option. Emily's voice became steadier. What if it is? The two men looked at each other briefly. Ryan laughed softly. Emily, life doesn't work like that. Maybe it could, she said. Daniel studied her face carefully. You're serious, he said. Double quotes, yes. Ryan leaned forward, suddenly interested. Okay, he said slowly. Explain. Emily gathered her courage. What if, instead of choosing one, we tried something different? Silence filled the table. Ryan stared at her like he had misunderstood. Daniel frowned slightly. You mean? Ryan began. Emily nodded. Double quotes, yes. Ryan leaned back in his chair again, letting out a quiet laugh of disbelief. That's definitely unexpected. Daniel looked thoughtful rather than shocked. You're suggesting we all stay together somehow? He said. Emily nodded again. No, it sounds strange. Ryan rubbed his chin. Strange is one word for it. Emily quickly added, I'm not asking you to accept something you don't want. Daniel spoke quietly. Why do you think this could work? Kay, Emily answered honestly. Because what we have is already unusual, Kay, and because I care about both of you in different ways. Ryan glanced at Daniel again. So now the decision isn't just hers. Daniel nodded slowly. It seems that way. For the first time that evening. The conversation shifted. Emily had spoken her truth. Now the future depended on them. Ryan looked thoughtful. You're basically asking two men who barely know each other to share the same relationship. Emily winced slightly. When you say it like that, Ryan smiled faintly. I'm just being realistic. Daniel tapped his fingers lightly on the table. I suppose the real question is whether we trust each other enough to try. Ryan looked at him with curiosity. You're considering this? Daniel shrugged slightly. I'm considering the fact that I don't want to lose her. Ryan nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. Emily watched both of them nervously. Ryan finally said, This might be the strangest conversation I've ever had. Daniel chuckled quietly. History is full of strange situations. Ryan laughed. Trust a history teacher to say that? Emily felt a tiny spark of hope growing. Ryan looked at her again. You really think this could work? I don't know, she admitted, but I know I'd regret not trying. Daniel looked at Ryan. Ryan looked back at him. A silent understanding slowly formed between them. Ryan finally sighed. Well, he said, life is already weird enough. Daniel smiled slightly. That's true. Ryan turned to Emily again. All right, he said slowly. Let's say we try. Emily's heart jumped. Daniel nodded. We take things one step at a time. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time that night, she smiled without forcing it. But deep down, all three of them knew something important. This decision was only the beginning, because loving two people at once was never going to be simple, and none of them yet understood how complicated their lives were about to become. 3 months had passed since Emily Carter had made the bold choice. She had stepped into the cafe expecting to lose one person and leave with heartbreak, but instead she had chosen them both. And somehow, Daniel Brooks and Ryan Walker had agreed to try it. Life had not slowed down for any of them, yet something had changed. There was a rhythm now, fragile but real, that connected the three of them in a way that surprised even Emily. At first, the new arrangement felt strange. Emily still remembered the early days sitting alone in her apartment, wondering how she could keep two hearts in her hands without breaking either one. Daniel, as steady as ever, had brought her comfort. His calm presence made late nights feel safe. He would sit beside her, reading quietly while she traced her fingers along the coffee mug. And just having him there felt like a small miracle. Ryan, on the other hand, brought energy, adventure, and a thrill she had never imagined she could feel in such a peaceful town. When he returned from his photography trips, the stories and images he brought with him pulled Emily out of her routine, reminding her there was a world beyond the lake and the falling leaves. The first challenge had come when jealousy surfaced unexpectedly. Daniel had never been possessive, but there were moments when he noticed Emily laughing at one of Ryan's stories and felt a sting. Ryan, ever honest, admitted that he sometimes feared losing Emily to the very stability Daniel offered. These were the nights when Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her decision. She had expected life to be simple once she decided to love them both. But love never came with simple instructions. She had to navigate conversations filled with honesty, admitting when she felt anxious, sad, or confused. There was no room for lies or pretending. That had been the one lesson she learned quickly. If they were going to make this work, honesty was non-negotiable. Despite the difficulties, the three of them found their rhythm. Daniel still spent most evenings with her, at the small house she rented near the lake. They cooked together, watched old movies, and talked about her day, his work, or books he had recently read. Ryan fit in like a whirlwind, showing up with photos from his latest trips, telling stories that made Emily laugh until her cheeks hurt, and dragging her outside to see sunsets, rainstorms, or frozen lakes shimmering under the moonlight. First, Emily had worried the differences between Daniel and Ryan would cause friction. But she realized that their differences were exactly what made the arrangement possible. Daniel grounded her. Ryan lifted her. Together, she was learning to see herself through both lenses. One winter evening, Emily stood on the frozen lakeshore, the air sharp and cold against her skin. Ryan had just returned from a 2-week trip to British Columbia. His backpack was heavy, his coat dusted with snow, but his eyes sparkled as he caught sight of Emily. She ran to him, pulling him into a tight hug. And for a moment, it felt like the world had paused. Daniel was standing close behind her, smiling, quietly watching the reunion with a mix of amusement and tenderness. "You're unbelievable," Emily said breathlessly, laughing at Ryan's dramatic gestures and wild stories. Ryan shrugged with a grin. "I try. You missed a few of my best shots?" Daniel smirked. "And I caught some of your worst snowfalls on camera, didn't I?" They all laughed. The sound carried over the frozen lake, bouncing against the quiet trees that lined the shore. Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in months, she didn't feel torn. She felt whole. She realized she didn't have to divide herself between two loves. They were not rivals. They were partners, and she was learning that love could stretch, shift, and bend in ways she had never imagined. That evening, as the sky darkened, Ryan pointed to the horizon. "Look," he said softly. Emily followed his gaze. Faint ribbons of green and purple shimmered in the northern sky. The aurora borealis danced just beyond the trees. Her breath caught. She had seen photos, read stories, even chased sunsets with Ryan before. But this was different. Standing there with both men, she realized how strange and wonderful her life had become. Daniel's arm rested gently on her shoulder, grounding her, and Ryan's hand brushed hers as he gestured toward the lights. She felt connected to them both in a way words could not capture. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" Emily asked quietly. Daniel tilted his head, thinking, "Sometimes. Never expected this life, honestly. But I also can't imagine it any other way now." Ryan laughed softly. "I'll admit I never saw myself in a relationship like this. But I guess that's the point of life. You never know what's coming. And somehow the unexpected works best." Emily smiled, leaning against Daniel while holding Ryan's hand. "It doesn't feel impossible anymore." Ryan shook his head. "Impossible? Maybe? Worth it? Absolutely." Over the next few months, they faced small but persistent challenges. Friends asked questions they weren't ready to answer. Family members frowned or raised eyebrows when they learned about the situation. Some strangers whispered or gave curious glances, but inside the triangle they had created, none of that mattered. They learned to protect their space, to communicate clearly, and to nurture the bond that had begun in a small cafe on an ordinary night. Every choice was deliberate. Every moment together mattered. Emily discovered that love was not just about passion or comfort. It was about trust, patience, and commitment. There were nights when she would sit alone with Daniel and talk about fears, worries, and the weight of keeping this unusual arrangement alive. There were mornings when she would wake up to Ryan's stories of faraway places, his energy pulling her into laughter before she had even fully opened her eyes. And there were moments when all three of them sat together, sharing silence, sharing warmth, sharing the quiet understanding that their love had become something extraordinary. One evening, Ryan returned from a photography assignment earlier than expected. Emily was waiting at the dock near the frozen lake, the cold wind whipping around them. Daniel had gone ahead to check on the cabin, leaving Emily and Ryan alone for a moment. She looked at him, noticing the tired lines around his eyes, the faint smudge of dirt on his coat from the trip. Yet when he smiled at her, all the fatigue disappeared. "You always make it look easy," she said softly. Ryan shook his head. "Easy? No, worth it. Every second." Emily felt her chest tighten with emotion. "I never thought I'd be here, standing on a frozen lake, feeling like I have everything I've ever wanted, and I didn't even have to give anyone up." Ryan reached for her hand. "Sometimes life doesn't follow the rules. That's the beautiful part." Soon Daniel joined them. He stood close, smiling at the sight of Emily and Ryan laughing together. "You two look ridiculous," he teased, but his tone held affection. Emily laughed. "We're ridiculous together." Ryan winked. "Exactly." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder and she leaned against him. Ryan's other hand rested lightly on her back. In that moment, Emily realized that love could exist in forms she had never imagined. It wasn't about choosing between two people. It was about choosing to be honest, to commit, and to trust the ones you loved most. And somehow, miraculously, the three of them were learning to make it work. The northern lights shimmered above, painting the sky in impossible colors. Emily raised her face to the display, breathing in the cold night air. Daniel whispered softly, "We're doing okay, you know." Ryan added, "Better than okay. We're extraordinary." Emily smiled, feeling the truth of their words deep in her heart. For the first time, she understood that love was not limited by tradition, logic, or fear. Love was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes impossible. But when it was real, it could survive everything. She had walked into a cafe expecting heartbreak, expecting to lose someone. Instead, she had discovered a life where hearts were stretched, shared, and protected. The three of them stood together on the frozen lake, hands entwined, breathing. In the crisp night air, they didn't know what the future held. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments of fear. But they also knew this. They had chosen each other. All three of them. And for Emily, Daniel, and Ryan, that choice was everything. Under the green and purple dance of the northern lights, Emily finally felt whole. She didn't have to lose anyone. She didn't have to compromise the love that had grown between them. She had chosen a new way to love, and in doing so, she had found a bond that was stronger than anything she had imagined. It wasn't simple, and it wasn't easy, but it was theirs. And in that quiet, frozen moment on the lake, Emily realized something extraordinary. She had all she had ever wanted without giving up anyone she loved. The night stretched on. Snow fell lightly around them. The lake was silent except for the sound of their laughter, the quiet of their shared presence, and the soft wind weaving through the trees. Three hearts had found a way to beat together. And somehow, against all odds, it felt like the only way it could ever be.